We took our gauges back out of the Jeep there after we were just fitting them up. It was just kind of fit them, make sure they fit, adjust our ears on our bracket here if we had to do that. And then I'll probably do some finish welding on this as just tacked together for fitment purposes. Then we had to wait until we got our senders in to match the gauge. And as I mentioned before, you need to do a little bit of homework. If you didn't get a sender with your gauge, you're going to have to find one that matches. And so what happens is you got to find the right one here that's going to match. So this is the pressure gauge, and you're going to have to find one that goes up to 100 psi. And then with the temp gauge, we had to find one that went up to 300, and that'll be Fahrenheit. This is the temperature sender that is supposed to match that gauge, and this is the pressure sender that's supposed to match that. So we got two of these, one of these, and then we just got to install them in our locations underneath the Jeep, and then we have to run our wires. I got a few little different fittings here. Use what you need to use to make it fit. We got 45 degree, 90 degree, and nipple and coupler to extend it. Whatever works to make it fit in place. Inside here, working with these gauges, we're just going to run some blue wires in through the dash. And I just got a rubber grommet in there so that the body metal isn't going to cut our wires or whatever. Basically took these three wires, taped them all together with black tape, poked a hole in the grommet, shove them through, go at the bottom, route them where they need to go, and trim off the excess wires on both ends. Okay, so under here we can see that's one of our pressure sensors right there. We've got our blue wires coming out from the floor up above. So this is on the passenger side. And then in here is on the driver's side. That's the other pressure sensor. I do not have the temperature sensor hooked up yet. Haven't found a location for that. But I will be hooking up these two sending units with the blue wires there. And we want to do all of this work before we put in that transfer case, so we got room to work here because we still got to put our linkage in here. So we're going to hook up these sending units. Once we get that in, we can put in our transfer case. I've got this set of instructions here, or a guide. Now if we look on here, it's going to say battery negative, ignition positive, and then S, which I'm assuming is sender to the sender there. And then here's for our lights. So you're going to have your switch ignition and then your ground, and then that's going to be the light. We got our wires all hooked up here, and when I look on here, I see 12 volts. I'm assuming this is going to be our 12 volt. We've got hard to see, but that's a B, so I'm going to say that that's battery negative, and then T is for terminal, is what I'm thinking. So that's where I'm going to hook up my blue wire. So what I did was I just made a series of pigtails here. So we got the red wire for our power, our switched power. We've got orange for the lights, which again is switched power, and it's going to turn on with the light switch. It'll turn on the interior lights. And this is also the factory color in the dash as well, so we keep it all the same. And then we've got two series of ground wires. We've got ground to the gauge, and then we've also got ground to our light here. They're basically all the same. 3 into 1 to where it's going to connect to its connecting point. Turn our key to accessory here, and we probe our wires. So the red wire down here, which should be this one, so that's our switched power for the gauges. So this is the switched power for the lights, but it's not coming on. The reason for that is because this is connected to the light switch. So I'll turn on the light switch, and then we'll see that we'll have power to this, regardless whether the ignition is on or off. So what I'll do is I'll shut this ignition off here, and then we're going to turn on our lights. You can see that the lights are on there, and they're on in the dash as well. Now when we probe that orange, that's where our light comes on. So this is going to come on when we turn on the lights with the light switch. So I'm pretty confident that we've got our right connections here, and then we just have to find a ground. You could fasten that anywhere. In fact, if you wanted to, you could fasten it closer in here to the body metal in here if you wanted to do that. But what I've done is I have all of my ground connections kind of concentrated in that one spot over there. So then in the future, they're all in one location, and then you could check them all if you had to. You don't have to keep taking the vehicle apart to try and find different grounds located at different spots. For some reason, after we installed this, none of the gauges were working. I'm trying to figure out why. And as it turned out, that wire that I had identified, this red wire on here, on the end, I identified that as a switched power, and I thought I proved it. But then now, if I check it now, it's not working. Now this is actually for, I guess, the cigarette lighter. So this is the cigarette lighter. This one is for the power outlet. And then you have the light, that part where the ashtray and the cigarette lighter and all that kind of stuff is. I'll just check it again. Right now, we don't have anything. As we switch on the ignition, check it again, we don't have anything. Check the other one, which is black. Nothing on that one either. Don't know why. I actually went to go try and find the fuse for this. The fuse showed good. It is actually number 2 fuse out of fuse box over there. It showed it was good. The next plan is, if I can't use that one, it's not going to work. Here's our plug-in here for our vehicle information center. I used the book to find out this is the switched power wire right here. It ends up being number 16. If we look into the book here, you'll see that 16 fused ignition switch output run. So that's the one that I'm going to use now, and hopefully we'll have some working gauges here. That's just to prove to you guys that that's our switched power. That's with the ignition on. And again, with the ignition off, it's out. So that's our switched power that we'll use for those gauges. We had a series of blue fuses blown here. Fuse 21, fuse 14. We changed those out. I do believe fuse 21 is the power outlet. Fuse 14 is for the accessory plug-in that doesn't get used, which is this one here. And that's a red and black in there. Red is your power. That's where we lost that because the fuse blew. Now, for some reason, and then this is always power on here, and that's going to be power on your orange. So this green one here that came out of that plug that goes to the vehicle information center, this one now doesn't show any power, switched power with the light. Now, I've checked all those fuses and they're all good. I've also checked the fuses under the hood and that nothing's blown there, so I cannot explain this one here. This orange one here is for the lights. This is also ignition power on. When you turn the ignition on, I can't get that to work with the light either. Again, we can't find any blown fuses on the inside here or under the hood. So this one here, I don't know about. I was thinking that maybe one of the reasons that the gauges weren't working because we didn't have an effective ground. So what I did was I ran a ground right from the tranny pan bolt all the way over to my ground connection over there, just to be sure, because it is directly to the source, right, rather than me trying to chase down a ground wire. So we did that, and then we hooked these gauges up. I basically had a spare gauge, the temp gauge that I was using to test the pins to see what pin was what. T was positive, B was negative, and then you had your sender on the bottom. And then I did actually get a reading, but it was almost maxed out. It didn't max it out, but it was almost maxed out. I used another gauge, didn't work. It just pinned it out, and then the gauge never did go back to 0 again. Confuses me because these are supposed to be 12-volt ignition source for these gauges. It's not like a factory gauge that gets a reduced voltage like 5 volts. at this moment, I've decided to unhook everything. I'm just going to temporarily put these gauges in the dash and reassemble everything, and I'm going to order a new gauge kit with senders and gauges and everything, and we'll start again when we get them in the mail. See if we can't conquer this issue.